combo classroom where it might be quite dark right here, but what I can brighten it a bit with the computer screen if needed, but in a much more fun way with a candle, which we can then use while I discuss some mathematical concepts to celebrate, in a way, it being the day before Halloween, which I think we could consider All Hallows Eve, because usually the eve is the night before, and so Halloween, one of the terms or names for it and part of its origin is All Hallows Eve. And so right now it's sort of All Hallows Eve, the 30th, not the 31st. And I also think that if it's before the eve, well, you know what's before eve in things are odds. So I also think we could perhaps call it All Hallows Odd occurring today. And with this live stream, where we are going to be discussing some composite numbers and carving this pumpkin in a moment, I first need to note I have not been able to post on this channel for a little bit. I wanted to return about a month ago, and I've also been a bit absent from all aspects of the combo curriculum or the combo web of classrooms and my two channels and discussing things with people and so on. And I'm not going to discuss all of the details behind that right now, but I'll really quickly discuss a few key details, which I will say I have been working very hard on studying things, and I've learned more and more about number theory in the past few months than ever, perhaps. I'm very sorry I haven't been able to post any of this stuff, but I have so many ideas lined up and written out, ready for things, and there's been a lot of difficulty with things like film locations. What is that? Is it a squirrel back there? Some creature back there. The squirrels have returned. I will explain that in the daytime when some of the squirrels actually visit. But there's a whole new squirrel saga. But the squirrel saga, I'll get carried away if I start talking about it. But crazy squirrel footage coming. Anyway, a few key problems have come up with me figuring out where and how I'm going to film things around here. My parents are getting divorced, and they own this house right here. And I'll just say, without giving too many details, that me and my father have a rocky relationship, and he has made it difficult for me to figure out where and when I can film certain things here. I was going to set up and had set up a whole sort of indoor studio that I now can't use for the time being because of a bunch of nonsense changing. But that will come to fruition someday, maybe. And for now, I bought a new type of microphone, so maybe I can go on the go a bit more. See, like, the audio for this is coming through here, and so I can go all the way back here or whatever, and it's not changing the audio tone. I could clip this onto myself, but I need to figure out how to do that without rustling too much stuff. And so, this will maybe help me go on the go more. And maybe I'll just have to start filming lectures in random places, because I need to show you folks all the notes I've discovered. And in today's little live video, which is pretty late, I don't expect too many people to join live, but lovely to have whoever is live, anyone who catches it now or in the future. I want to share a few things that I've been discovering, and it's the type of discover where they're simple enough facts that I'm sure many people have stumbled into them, but sometimes it's about the way of phrasing a very simple fact or of looking at something. Like if you look at the number line and the factors that numbers have, just looking at the list of factors tells all of the stories you could derive from it in a way if you have imagination and you do the extensions mentally. But, you know, you can create pictures that point you in the direction of something that maybe the obvious construction of something that you never really realized works as its definition or as a way to view it. And I want to begin with two ways of viewing composite numbers that I'm not sure which of I can make a guess which of these people will more so see in their head as the definition of composite numbers. But there are sort of two ways that I bet you folks think about composite numbers that it's very interesting to hold side by side. And I should start carving the pumpkin in a moment, but I'll do the first composite fact or viewpoint first. And the first one, and we have a comment mentioning, for example, the sieve or sieve. pronounced language is weird, of Eratosthenes. And yes, that's a classic way of getting or viewing the composite numbers, is that if you were to take the number 2 and you cancel out all multiples of 2, you put an X through them on a number line you have, and then you look at the first thing that's missing and that wasn't crossed off. And the first one would be 3. Then you take all of the multiples of those, and by multiples, to view it visually, you would be essentially jumping 2. You cross off everyone that's a jump of 2 apart, then cross off everyone that's jump of 3 apart. Then you don't need to do 4, because 4 is already crossed out, and so you go right to 5. And then 5 is the first uncrossed one that you maybe circle, or however you view it, the first uncrossed off one, and then you cross off all of the multiples that are hops of it apart. I also have many ways that I've been writing down to view it. Like, here's one that I won't give all the details about, but one you folks could ponder is, imagine it like a garden where different sorts of plants, maybe one plant blooms every 5 days. Maybe a gardener is curious which sorts of plants bloom on the same day, or which sorts of blooms only occur once or many times. So there's a lot of analogy-like ways we could view this as well. But one key thing is, the one that I wanted to mention here is, when we just define composite numbers, there are 2 directions we can take that. And one of the most obvious ones is they are sort of the non-primes. I almost want to say anti-primes, but anti-primes are a nickname for the highly composite numbers, which ironically include a few non-composites. 1 and 2 are highly composite. But with, in fact, that's a side note. I would change the definition. I think the definition of highly composites should be slightly altered, so 1 is not included. 2 even is debatable if I think 2 deserves to be, because some of those are just trivial cases, and multiplicatively, it's funny. We're used to 0 being like nothing, and this like void before things that you don't even always encounter in your problems, and then 1 being sometimes trivial, like you multiply by 1, doesn't do anything. 1 is a perfect power. Great, because yeah, it's 1 to whatever power. Sometimes it's the trivial seeming 1. And trivial, remember, that gives it a lot of power. If you're the one doing everything trivial, that means people are taking for granted that you're everywhere. So that's not like a diss on the number 1. It's extremely powerful and everywhere. 0 and 1 are like the backbone of our system and many important systems. But 1 can be trivial. However, multiplicatively, sometimes 2 feels like the trivial one. Because if you look at the definition of prime numbers, based on, for example, the sieve technique where you're crossing them out that I mentioned, if we do it that way, we can't start that from 1. If I cross off every multiple of 1, everything's crossed off. So we're like, okay, we're skipping 1 and we're defining primes based on this process that starts from 2, essentially. So of course 2 is going to be circled in that if we excluded 1, and 2 is the first thing that we actually included. So it's funny that, like, what is the first element that is like the first number going on? Well, it could be the first of any sequence that you're dealing with, but some of the common variations are, sometimes the first is 0, sometimes the first is 1, and once in a while, secondly, once in a while, it will come third. And so what I was going to say here, though, is we may view the primes as non-composites. And I'm not calling them anti-composites because that's a nickname for highly composites. I guess that was all the side note about those. But there's another way we can view them, which is sort of the opposite of that. Now, I want you to imagine primes as ingredients. So we're running a kitchen. Oh, I got to be careful. I can't gesture when there's a blade right here. Okay, the blade's going to point that way. Imagine you're running a kitchen and you got all sorts of ingredients. So maybe 2, it's got to be a pretty common ingredient. So 2 as the first prime. Maybe that is flour or something. It's 1 cup of flour is 2. 3 maybe is a tablespoon of olive oil or something. So now let's say we're going to make some recipes. What would happen if I combine these ingredients? Well, let's say that we're making a smoothie where the order doesn't matter. I say smoothie because that's my best analogy for a recipe where it doesn't matter what order you stick the things in, you're just going to blend it at the end. That's not fully true. When you make a smoothie, there's a whole technique that you can do. You can make a smoothie better if you use a technique, but we're going to oversimplify things and say that you're making a smoothie. You got these ingredients, they're the primes. So each possible combination that we could put in the smoothie, like I could put 2 cups of flour and 1 tablespoon of olive oil. Okay, this is going to be a pretty bad smoothie. So I'm mixing up the types of kitchen, but in any case, whatever our ingredients are, if we have 2 doses of the first one and 1 dose of the second one, and recall that first and second, if we're talking about primes, we could say first means 2, second means 3. There, when we go straight into only talking about primes, it can be useful to just talk about the indices of them. But when we look at, the index of a prime, that gives us a very nice pattern at the beginning. You could, in a way, in a less technical way, the 0th prime is kind of 1. Then in a more technical way, the first prime is 2, and we could iterate it from there. No 0th-ish prime. We'll call it the 0th-ish prime is 1. Then what is the prime with that index? 2. We got to the next prime. Okay, what is the second prime? The prime with that one's index? 3. We go right to the next. Okay, what is the third prime with the third index? 5. It keeps going, but then we hit a gap because the 5th prime is not the prime after 5. Prime after 5, 7. 5th prime, 11. So I've been studying these small primes for a book I'm writing about Threeven numbers. Or let me finish my analogy first here real quick. I think it's very interesting that composite numbers can simultaneously be described as the non-primes out of the whole numbers and as all of the sets of primes. If we have an unordered set of prime numbers that we allow repeats in, so when we have sets, which gets us to combinatorics, not what combo class is named after, but it is a nice coincidence because combinatorics comes up all the time. And with combinatorics, some important aspects are if we have a set of things and we have some amount of symbols that could be in it or amount of types of thing, we'll call them a symbol because that's an easy way to visualize them, the symbol 2, the symbol 3 or whatever. But it's an item of some sort. And if we have a collection of them, which is a set, then technically we're going to call this a multi-set, this type, because that is one crucial difference. Can we repeat elements or not? If we could not repeat elements, we get a particular type of composite numbers that are very important. They're called the square-free numbers, and they're the ones that cannot. It's really confusing because, then square full, it doesn't mean the opposite of square free. It sometimes does, but then other people use it to mean this thing called powerful numbers. And then powerful numbers sound like perfect powers, which sound like prime powers, which aren't primes. And it's this whole crazy web, but that's practically a whole separate video, how confusing this web of things called perfect something or square something or something full or something free. But here we're going to assume that I'm using, this one has a slightly neater definition. Most people will use square free in this way. A square free number is a number that has no exponent in its prime factorization larger than 1. So it's not divisible by any square. And you might think, why just squares? But if you were divisible by a cube, you're also divisible by the square. So not being divisible by a second power ends up excluding you can't be divisible by any higher power. Otherwise, the second power would be among your factors. So when we have these combos, if we take all of the combos that we can only use things up to, or sorry if I was saying about the order yet, because I was mixing up the 2 traits. The first, what I meant about what leads us to the square free ones precisely is that we have those ones you cannot have repeats. So if we have a set and we want to make our recipe out of our different primes that are our ingredients, and we're only using each prime up to once, which we can I like thinking of prime factorizations as having every prime in them, but most primes in the prime factorization, an infinite amount of them, typically all of them but a tiny handful, have the exponent 0 because we can have all the primes to the 0th power. It works. So in a way, it's more beautiful to say you have all the primes but a bunch of them are to the 0th power than to say you have a smaller subset of the primes. But of course, we're going to focus on the ones that matter, the ones that aren't functioning as a times 1. And so we're focusing on the ones that don't have the 0 there. Now, when we make our recipes, if we only allow up to one of each, we get the square free numbers, which you can also get to from a given number by taking what's called its radical, also known as its square free kernel. I way prefer the term square free kernel because radical is also used to mean the type of square root thing. Very different. The radical of 16, if you hear that in number theory, is a different result than the square root of 6. Than what if you said 16 with a radical symbol on it? That means a different number than the radical of 16. One of them would send us to 4, one would send us all the way to 2. But essentially, if we take the radical or square free kernel, which in my videos, I'm going to use the term square free kernel usually because that is much clearer. It's its own thing. If we take that of a number, then it shaves off all of the exponents that are more than 1, and it sends us to that square free number. They're very notable. They're a big aspect of one of the big unsolved questions in number theory called the ABC conjecture. Haven't made a video about that yet because I want to study it a bit more. I like making videos about things once I've studied them, taken a break from thinking about that particular thing, then come back to study them again. And then at least once, sometimes back and forth a few times, because then you can see your old notes, reflect on it, sometimes you see it in a completely new way that second time or third time. So I need to do that a few more times to the ABC conjecture before I explain it, but it is very involved in questions about the radicals related, but it really relates to these cool types of numbers called smooth numbers and rough numbers. And I'm not going to do the full I'm going to make a video about those at some point, but I will give you their definition. The smoothness of a number relates to its largest prime factor, being its largest prime factor is at some maximum, meaning if a number is 3 smooth, all of the prime factors are 3 or below. Whereas the roughness is in some ways the opposite. The definition looks sort of the opposite, but in practice plays out very different. When I read about smooth and rough numbers, it sounds just like, okay, we care about all the prime factors under a point, or are they all bigger than a certain point? But when you look at what that means, the rough numbers become more and more numerous for a given type of thing. And the smooth numbers, this is a whole separate video topic, but the smooth numbers are actually quite rare. They become very spread apart. When you imagine a 5 smooth number, those are the numbers that have no prime factors larger than 5. You get a ton of them at the beginning of the number line, but then you get these bigger and bigger gaps pretty quickly. And a big part of the book I'm writing about Threeven even numbers relates to 3 smooth versus 5 smooth. Well, almost versus 5 smooth. The base we count in, base 10, is so dumb that it's not based around 5 smooth numbers, but rather the Throd 5 smooth numbers. Our base is good. Well, it's not that they're Throd, but the numbers that it is good with are the Throd 5 smooth numbers. Throd meaning non-Threeven, meaning not a multiple of 3. Because our base is you want to call it 5 smooth because it's good with 5 and less, but it's not good with 3. And our base is kind of good with 3 because of these. You get some bonuses by being a factor of 1 less than a base. So 9 is 1 less than our base. The factor of that gets some superpowers. It gets some divisibility tricks and stuff. However, the base dependence on that distracts a lot of people. Part of my book is going to show people how numbers do stuff like that that's cool in all sorts of bases. We shouldn't even be praising 3 necessarily for those divisibility tricks. What you can see a wider web of why those occur. They're still beautiful when they occur, in many bases. It doesn't have to be just a singular case to be awesome. And when we look at patterns like that, there's a lot of other reasons 3 and 9 are notable. Here's a fact that I came across 9 surprisingly late. I was like, I had sort of overlooked 9. I was like, okay, it's one of the square numbers. But one fact that I just stumbled into one day and I was like, huh, that's true. One of those simple but hadn't really phrased it to myself before facts was 9 is the first odd composite number. And odds and evens are pretty important. And so being the first odd composite number is pretty notable. Even more than that, after studying polygonal numbers, which are the triangular numbers, the square numbers, the pentagonal numbers, and so on, they're one subset of the figurate numbers, which figurate numbers are going to play a key role in the next big project I'm releasing on the Combo Class channel. I have 2 really big episodes that I've been working on. They're like, I don't know how long they are, but they're going to be long and really good. And I, for some reason, almost finished one of those and then started a different one. I thought I was going to go really quick on this next one and put it out quick, but I got very distracted by the figurate numbers. But it's not just about the polygonal numbers. It's about a new type that very, very, very underrated. Extremely, extremely underrated. So underrated that it made me cancel putting out another bonus video on this channel because I was talking about it's complicated story. I'll explain that later. But the next main Combo Class channel is going to be about a really cool type of figurate number that I am going to name in the episode because I literally could not find people talking about some of the stuff except like buried as like side notes in research papers and stuff. So those are going to be really cool, but they're related to particularly square and triangular numbers mostly. They are related to the other types as well. Actually, they're very related to the other types as well, but you'll see that. Square and triangular numbers, though, are the ones for now you're probably the most familiar with. I will, over time, explore more about pentagonal numbers with you folks, but what I want to get into here for a moment is that square and triangular numbers, if you think about, of course they contain 1 for each of these, because we can make them as like dots. I can make, a bunch of dots in a square shape, or I can make a bunch of dots in like sort of an equilateral triangle if I offset the dots, if they're sort of laid between each other. And so if I make that equilateral when offset triangle or a square out of dots, of course 1 would be the first case of that. This is an example of what I mentioned. 1 gets a lot of stuff for free, for trivial, because it's just powerful and everywhere. But then what about the next one? Well, we have triangular numbers. Yeah, it's going to be a 3. We have square numbers. Yeah, it's going to be a 4. We have pentagonal numbers. Yeah, it's going to be a 5. Those just line up with the amount of sides of the shape that the family is. And so those almost are trivial in their own way. Not as trivial as 1 feels, which 1 is every type of those. But the fact that 3 is triangular or 4 is square isn't like a big thing you'd calculate. It's just the amount of sides of the shape you're basing the family on. So in a weird way, we would say maybe 4 is a trivial square number too. So what's the first non-trivial square number in that metric? 9. So you can find these facts where I was like, I had overlooked 9 because when I was a kid, I loved 9 because I didn't know everything about all the other bases, but I knew 9 did these weird divisibility things. I would think about I would do these mind reading things on my friends and stuff where I would have them pick a number, do these things on it. The first ever Combo Class video on YouTube is about, the first one was an intro. Apart from an intro video on my Combo Class channel, my other main channel, there's the first main lecture type video I made is about 9s. I will come back to it at some point too. It's recurred. There's still a 9 spray painted over there. Well, for now, I'm calling it an upside down 6 because I'm in love with 6s now after studying my book. I love 6. And I'm not even kidding. I went into this thinking that I was making a half joke book, like who would make a massive textbook about 3-even numbers. Along the process, I also realized even numbers are so important. I'm trying to give three even numbers a similar level of credit to even, but even numbers, I would say, are underrated despite getting so much credit just because of how many cool patterns they have. So I began going really deep into studying. Okay, to what degree am I biased about that? Do I just want to find cool stuff about three for my book? And to what degree is three actually like extra, really fundamental, like two, in a way that five or seven might not be? And it turns out that gap between three and five does a lot in terms of their effects everywhere. Other weird traits, like three being the closest integer to E, also have powerful effects. I realized in the process, okay, my book needs to give credit to even numbers as well. So it's about three even numbers. And given that it's about mostly whole numbers or fractions, which are composed of two whole numbers in a ratio, the whole number meaning integer there, I mean, um, with that, it's sort of three times two times one, the book's about. So, in a way, like one of the big themes of the book is one plus two plus three is one times two times three. They both give you six. I can add the first three or multiply the first three and get six. That's one of the traits you folks probably know about six. But the stuff I unraveled about six, not just in mathematics, but in the universe, in science and stuff, and in the human body, and all over in history, it turns out six is actually like the most important number larger than three. It's like it goes, the important numbers are like 0, 1, -1, 1/2, 2, 3, I, and 6. That's a slight exaggeration that those are the, oh wait, pi and e, and maybe the golden ratio, and maybe square root of 2. They get on too. But um that 6 is an unbelievable number, and it's like literally like all over the fabric of reality, all over the history has conspired. The way we like getting hooked on a single language or a single definition, history has conspired to bury all of these facts about 2 and 3 and try and make 5 look better than it is and make 10 look better than it is. So the whole book is also partially written as a roast on numbers like 10,000 or 50,000. Those are the most overrated numbers in existence. 10,000 might be the most overrated number. And not even getting started on the Ilians. The Ilians are, oh boy, the Ilians are not good numbers. Some of them are neat because they're cubes and stuff, and they're all perfect powers. But compared to other perfect powers, a number like billion is just such a bad, lame number. So I'll explain more what I mean about that in the future as we look more into other things. But I do want to make one very important side note, which is about bases. During my investigation, one of the other really big things I found was that I had been taking for granted this thing, which is that what I call basic bases, the way that we would think of base 10 or think of binary or think of the ones in between, essentially a base, a positional numeral system, 2 or larger, that follows the rules we're used to. I was thinking those sort of are maximally efficient and that we were holding alternate bases up to like them as the ideal in terms of efficiency, being that bases like that, apart from these shadow representations like point infinite nines, like 1.4 infinite nines is 1.5, apart from those, our base doesn't have double representations. I had been saying to myself. And that's what a lot of people say. That's like how it's written a lot of places. It's not just me who told myself this. I've read this a lot of places, but they don't. You can 08 is a string that means the same thing as just 8. So, and there's this trick that's really subtle. Our base does maximize a 1-to-1 correlation for a given amount of digits. If I say for the 4-digit strings, do those line up with all of the numbers up to 10 to the 4th power? -1 because we're one less than that new reset point. And it does. So it makes you feel like, how could that not be maximally efficient? Meaning, like, there are 9,999 numbers up that I can make, guys. I can make from 0000 up to 9999. And that is true. But why would we be thinking of it in terms of which 4-digit strings you can make and not which 4, 3, 2, or 1-digit strings you can make? In our language, we have different sizes of number. And so to really be like more maximally efficient, you would want to line up more with each possibility. I have different things for the full, outer set containing that, and that. And so that is closer what's called bijective bases. They have their own issues, though. And the simplest of the issues is they don't have a symbol for 0. They have to bring in an outside symbol for 0. But they're not necessarily the best, because as I thought further, I realized, well, we're definitely not using zeros well. But arguably, there are 3 other symbols, at least, I can think of that we're really not using well. If you want to express a real number, you don't just need 10 digits. You need up to 1 decimal point, up to 1 minus sign, and up to one of this next one could be variable length in some of the ways it's written or drawn, and there's not a global convention for how it's drawn. The other one is the vindiculum, that is like the line over or a dot over next to. There's different ways of doing it in different cultures that shows the repeating part of a repeating decimal, or in a different base, decimal-esque tail of a number. And so if we have all of those, why are we using those so poorly? If you want your set of symbols to be something that as many of the possible combinations of symbols do something different while avoiding certain things, like maybe you don't want overlaps of certain types. Maybe you don't want duplicates or gaps. But our base doesn't do that well, because I can't express a real number with 10 digits. Even if I could, the 0 thing I mentioned is clogging some stuff up. But we are being so inefficient with the fact that a number needs 3 extra symbols, as I mentioned, that none of them occur more than once in the symbol, in the string. And so I was like, what? Our base, there's like such an obvious solution to that one too. Why don't we have one symbol that if it's at the start of a number, it makes it negative? The only thing this would change is you wouldn't be allowed to write 0.5 if it was a point, or it would be a different symbol maybe, but you wouldn't be able to write like that 5 to mean 1/2. You just have to put the 0 in front. You have to write 0.5 or the equivalent. You can't just write 0.5. If we said that, put it at the beginning. It signifies negative. Put one of them in the middle. It signifies it's a decimal point cutoff. If there's 2 in the middle, either touching or separate, it means that the one on the left is the decimal point cutoff, and the one on the right is the portion where it starts repeating after. So it's just, there's like, and that was just, in 1 minute, I put that together and was like, we could so easily shave multiple symbols. And it sounds trivial to some people, but imagine you're designing a calculator. It's like, really, I'm going to express once in a while, I'm going to need to have a negative number that also has a vindiculum. And instead of our system just being like, that uses an extra dot in the way I mentioned, or plenty of other ways you could do that, you'd have to program in several other symbols. And not to mention the thing with the zeros, where we don't even have the trait that many people claim, where you don't really have duplicate representations for the integers. I mean, I know people aren't trying to mislead anyone when you see that in the text, but it's glossing over a pretty important detail, except when it starts in a 0. It's like, well, yeah, except when it starts in a 0, why is that part of the system that there's all these strings that start in something that don't do anything? And so this was a bit of a tangent, because it went off into how numbers are written, into representations of numbers. I'm going to get back to composite numbers. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to fully cut this, but we're going to do a little bit of pumpkin chopping. So also let me know if the audio is bad, or if you think it should go up or down or anything, because I'm using a new setup here, which I can move around easier if I grab it and carry it or clip it onto myself. However, you know me, I'm not a tech whiz. I live old fashioned, not like in terms of my beliefs, but in terms of like my use of technology and tools and stuff, or my habits and stuff. So I don't even know if I'm doing this right remotely. However, I do know a little bit about audio gear. So this is of the category of things that when I sit down with it a little bit more, I will be able to figure out, because I have worked with music equipment a lot in the past. And now, in that tangent, so that's the problem with this. I hope that didn't make a crazy noise. I'm propping it up on something. I'll figure out how to clip it onto my coat at some point, but I don't want to like rustle it around like crazy. I also don't really want it showing on my coat. It looks kind of bad. If I do, I'll just cross off the brand name, not because there's anything wrong with this brand as far as I know. It works for now. Works fine for now. So, but because I don't want any brand names when possible, old brands on the clocks make it in. If you're an old clock company, I'm not that mad if you make it in the background of a combo class shot. But I try and minimize the brands, and I've realized while filming this, I have all this footage that you're going to see that's incredible. That is of these crazy dice staircases that I made, and so I had to find all my dice. It involved digging up a bunch of dice. It involved all sorts of looking around every corner of the classroom and stuff. I've bought 1,000 dice, including these miniature ones, but they all got embedded in the ground after it rained and they got stepped on. So I need to dig them up once in a while. I dug up a bunch of dice, but I was trying to pose them for these shots of these like pyramid things I was making. You'll see what I mean. You'll see in the next video, the next main combo class episode. There's big, good ones coming out. And there, I didn't want the brand bicycle was printed on so many of the dice. And I was like, you damn it, bicycle, why do you have to put your name on where the one is? And don't let this all presses good press them. This is a roast on that company. No, it's, I don't know, but I don't want any brand names on my stuff. Brands are the enemy. They are the big companies. They're the enemy. Trust me. And combo class, there's a lot of co beginning words. I've been researching some linguistics and looking at the origin of combo class as being like co is together, or with. And combination, the origin of combo class, this is so cool. I never realized this. Combination is obviously like the long combo is a nickname for combination, you could say. And that is, you know, when I say combo class, that is being used as a nickname for combination, essentially. Combo means a lot of stuff to me. My religion is comboism, but combo, in short, stands for combination. And I need to angle this more upward. Okay, but I think I'm almost close to getting the top off. Can we even see what's going on? Now, one moment. How am I going to connect this? Oh, I got a while to go around. Okay, I briefly lost my train of thought, but what aspect of the composites was I talking about? Oh yeah, no, it was the language of combo class. So with combo class, there's a lot of co's that are good. You got coincidences, you got communication, you got contrast is a slightly different one. You got your cons that are like a flip of things, but contrast is part of combo theory. But there's a lot of co's, I realized, that represent a lot of coordinate, represent a lot of neat things. But there is some types that are the enemies. The enemies are lurking within sometimes. And one of the enemies is one of our co or com words, which are companies and corporations. They're the enemies, trust me. Everyone will see. But anyway, and I I have no enemies that are a particular person, but companies are trying to get you. But anyway, other forces are also trying to get people in my country. I'm not going to talk about that, but I will say it's been very difficult that the current government is trying to cancel the healthcare I need to survive. So that's not cool either. So I could go on a long political rant about that I may in a separate video at some point, but I will say to anyone who wonders about the impact of whatever's going on, the impact on me personally right now is I'm trying to get the government to not cancel a healthcare plan that I already have pre-existing that has been helping me survive. Because as you know, I've had to get surgeries before getting combo class and such, and fight through a lot of pain to make my videos and teach, and will probably be unable to do a lot of things if they succeed in canceling my healthcare. So we shall see about that. But I kind of want to move to another country. I'm not a fan of stuff going on. But separate from that, back to carving and composites. As I mentioned some things about 9. And as I've been going through each number and looking at like what are the cool traits of all the small numbers, because small numbers, when we're looking at things multiplicatively, if we're looking at things like factors and prime factors and traits about divisibility, anything in the land of being multiplicative, where some things are different than you're used to, like 2 is sort of the beginning and 1 is sort of the empty one, and 0 is almost like infinity. It sort of has all the factors. So we get this weird shift where 0 goes to infinity, 1 acts like 0, 2 acts like 1. But in a way, compared to an additive realm. And when we look at those, as I mentioned, a lot of people think of the composites as the non-primes, but I think it's a lot neater to think of them as the sets. The composites as a whole are the family that are the sets of unordered primes with duplicates allowed multiplied together. They're the products of the sets of unordered duplicates allowed primes. And so I think that's like sort of, I made this way too low. Okay, I got to salvage this by aiming way up. This will be the backside of the pumpkin. So the composites, I think, are really underrated because people give primes all this credit. People are like, primes are so mysterious. Primes do this. And it's true. Primes do all that stuff. They are unbelievably cool. And so people assume, oh, well, the facts about them would be a lot nicer always if we phrase them about the primes. Like you always hear, twin prime conjecture, gold box conjecture, phrase in terms of primes. Of course, we could phrase any of these in terms of the non-primes and flip the question and say, the twin prime conjecture is whether after a certain point there is always a composite 2 away from every prime has composites 2 away from it after a certain point. That would be if the twin prime conjecture is false. Or if it's true that there is no spot like that. And so this is aimed way too low. Okay, I got to get that up to there. Okay. Remember, if you're chopping stuff, never chop toward yourself. You always aim away from yourself, especially when you're using a big old dull knife like this. Now, ironically, it looked like I was stabbing toward myself, but the knife's not long enough to go all the way through the pumpkin. Like it's not long enough. It's not going to grow. Never trust what a knife will do in terms of what direction it'll go or anything like that. But I can trust it's not going to get longer. Okay, now, as I've been thinking about these recipes for composites, there's a lot of things that I used to think of in terms of primes that I realized, it's just as nice to phrase that thing in terms of composites. And often it's because instead of thinking of the composites as the non-primes in that scenario, thinking of the composites as the sets of primes. And in a way, that makes primes, I said, were like recipe ingredients. They were singular ingredients. Well, the composites are sort of like a meal you already made out of them. They're all the possible meals you could make out of those ingredients. So it's sort of interesting that the ingredients are the ones that get so much credit as what people hold up as the mysterious one, as opposed to the sets of all recipes you could make from the ingredients.
And this is certainly not a diss on prime numbers, but it made me realize composite numbers are just as mysterious when you think of them in the right way. In a way, they are a level beyond primes, almost being the way of combining sets of primes. And they deserve a lot more credit. Somehow, composite numbers are sort of treated as the boring ones, as if when you have people have these false dichotomies that make it easier to, believe certain things or feel certain ways. And one of them might be like, oh, if I have a set of things and this portion of it's really cool, that implies the rest of it is not that cool. But maybe we went wrong by hyping up primes as so mysterious, because it implies that to a degree that composites aren't. But really, the composites or the primes are just two different ways of looking at this really cool puzzle in a way. And if you ask like where the primes are, it's sort of okay, the wind's going and the candle went out. Let's try and relight the candle. It's pretty crazy that if you ask like where the primes are, for example, that you could phrase that as like in this web of all the whole numbers larger than one, or including one if you include an empty prime factorization. Ooh, these shadows are cool. Look at those shadows. That's some neat shadows, yeah. I realized that you never see shadows properly when you're filming stuff if you're just using one camera, because the flash from the camera is going at the same direction as where the film is. And so the shadows are like always perfectly blocked when you're filming. And it doesn't look like it to your eyes. You're like tricked. If you look at it with your eyes, you'll see a cool shadow sometimes if you have flash on a camera and you're filming. But then if you look through what the camera sees, you don't see it because it's at the exact point where it's blocked, because they're going from the same place. It's like how the sun wouldn't see a shadow. And so uh, you have to, I realized when I want to film at night, I should really not use the flash on the phone. I should use a separate flash, because then you see shadows like this. And shadows are really cool looking, and a lot of people don't get them in videos. And maybe it makes videos lose some of the depth you'd normally get at night. Like if you film at night, maybe we're used to nighttime and candles in real life feeling like this, but you lose some of that depth when you do the other, when you film it just with the single one. You can always use candles too, like this, if you so wish. But of course, you got to be careful with stuff like that. I've actually burnt myself on a candle during a live stream. It wasn't picking one up like that, but it was leaning into what. There's an old live stream where I literally light myself on fire by accident. Never, but still do not try and copy. I'll just say as a disclaimer in case it helps, don't copy anything I'm doing without doing your own research. And yes, that includes carving a pumpkin, because why not do your own research? Doing your own research is always good. Research pumpkins, find out. Yeah, it's mandatory. You want to carve the pumpkin? It's not even for safety. It's just for being smarter and cooler. You got to research pumpkins, because one reason is you'll find out pumpkins are berries. I always loved berries as a kid. Then I found out about botanical berries. That's one of the older, crazier episodes on the Combo Class channel, is about botanical berries and how pumpkins are one of them. And cover, stay alive. Okay, I'm trying to shield it. You also can get cool like glows and stuff on cameras like that. But so with these composites, when we ask where the primes are or stuff like that, which essentially mathematicians have been able to prove the rate we should expect primes to appear up to different points of the number line, but not the exact details. The rate as in terms of limits and things like that, not in terms of how many primes I can, easily plug in. How many primes are there between 7 trillion and 7 trillion 400 or something? Are there any primes in that range? That sort of thing is much trickier. And so the ability, of course, you could do something by just, testing every single number up to its square root. If you need to know if a given number is prime, try dividing every prime number up to its square root. If you don't know the list of prime numbers, you're going to have to try dividing all of the whole numbers up to the square root. If you don't know the square root, I don't know. Well, you're going to have to do everything. You're going to have to learn 1 + 1 = 2 eventually if we keep following you don't knows. But assuming you know some of that stuff, like about where the square root is. Go a little higher if you need a little safety net. Go until you're a little past the square root. If none of them have divided it, it's a prime. But how are you going to do that when you have a really, really big number? People don't realize what adding a digit does. It makes it really big. Think, okay, it makes it 10 times bigger. But what does that mean about like the 5-digit numbers versus the 4-digit numbers? There are about 9 times more 5-digit numbers than 4-digit numbers. And so, or is it 10? I need to think through. It's a little confusing because sometimes it's offset by one. It's 9 or 10 times because, yeah, are we counting all the, it's sort of like what I mentioned earlier. Are we counting all the ones up to a size or just counting that size? If we just count 5-digit numbers and we're assuming that we're not using the 0007 or something as one, like, 4 zeros, then a 7 is my 5-digit number. Not that. Just like the 5-digit numbers would begin from 10,000, very overrated number, and then would progress, up to 99,999. And that is going to be, about 90,000 numbers compared to about 9,000. Oh, so it's about 10 times for individual digits. I was just trying to go through that in my head. For individual amounts, it'll be about 10 times more. And so if we look at like all of the numbers that have less than 8 digits versus, well, what if I check the 8-digit ones next? Like say you'd checked all the 7-digit numbers for something. Okay, now it's just time to check the 8-digit numbers. Well, going up to now we're just going to check the 8-digit numbers is going to be like 9 or 10 times the amount that you have to do. Like even counting all that has occurred before, it's still going to be vastly greater. And so I'll show the exact math of that sometime. I'll go through and think more. If I write it down, it'll be a lot clearer on which ones are 9 or 10 times based on which sizes. But it's kind of neat to think through, like there are sort of 10 one-digit numbers if you count 0. But I like to think of it as 0 is a 0-digit number. We just write the 0 out of necessity to show something's there. But if zeros at the front don't do anything, that's a 0 at the front. So 0 is kind of like blank, but we just have to write that unnecessary one to show it's there. So I think of 0 as a 0-digit number, making this pattern much nicer. That would give us, 1 0-digit number, 9 1-digit numbers, 90 2-digit numbers. And so here's the precise thing I was trying to get to. Here I've gotten to the precise fact. Each digit size is 10 times the amount of them as the previous digit size, or 9 times the amount of all of the previous digit sizes up to that point. So if you add the 10-digit, if you add a certain amount of digits and then you add a new one, adding that new digit means all the work you've done so far is now 10% of what you're going to need to do from adding one digit. So people really misunderstand, like imagine multiple more adds of that. People misunderstand how big things can get apart. For example, a classic one due to relating to wealth inequality and such is it's good to think of a million and a billion as incredibly different things. A million and a billion are very, very different. Multiplicatively, they are a bit less different because we can times 10 3 times. Just got to times 10 3 times. That's like nothing. That gets me right there. But additively, if you're at a million and you want to get to a billion, you are at 0.1%, 1/1000th of the way there. So, the obvious logic from this is that, if you were a billionaire, it only would take, 0.1% of your money to use $1 million to do a good thing. So that's important to think of those vastly, vastly different things. And the difference scales up. So like in a multiplicative sense, 1,000 to a million is the same as a million to a billion. In an additive sense, nowhere close. Like not, 1/10 of a percent, 1/1000th of the difference. In term, or one less than that sometimes, when similar to the digit sizes thing. So did I finally get this off? I got almost all the way around and then I got distracted because the candle went out. So I'm never going to finish this pumpkin at this rate because I got to start being quiet now. It's getting later out here. It's after 10 o'clock. So I'm going to position this a little bit closer, be a little quieter, and I can go inside if I need, but the pumpkin is going to be better out here. So I'm going to try and do the pumpkin here and just not talk super loud. And first we got to just get through. We have a little extra rim right there, no issue. Okay, now let's see what's on the inside. I want to see if this follows my theory. My theory is that most pumpkins that are sold at the store these days, they've bred to be easier to cut, and that if you wanted to make pumpkin soup or something out of this, or roast the seeds, which I've done before, the seeds one, not the soup. But I've eaten raw, like you can eat pumpkin. Like you want to, you just eat pumpkin, but it could be hard on the stomach, so don't eat a ton of pumpkin. I'm going to swallow this. It's fine, but don't copy me if you see me do anything like that. Do your own research. But it genuinely tastes not that bad. It tastes like if you had a persimmon. I don't know if you know persimmons, but the flatter type of persimmon that are crispy, great fruit, epic fruit. But those, it's like a bad one of those. But it's still like, it's not like an inedible one of those, like a sort of bland one of those. Could be hard on the stomach, so you might not want to do that much. But if you were to do that, yeah, this looks kind of like it to me. I think they're making them hollower, the pumpkins, and maybe thinner. This one's not thin, but it does look like it's not like full of seeds like they often would be in the past. They would be full of seeds, and maybe I was just getting them from somewhere else, but I feel like they've bred them particularly to make them easier to cut. And I don't know how I feel about that, because like, what if I wanted to make pumpkin soup someday? Then, maybe you bred out all the flavor and stuff. But it tasted pretty bland to me, is all I'm saying. But with the pumpkins, there's another pro to that. It's nice to have an easy to cut pumpkin on Halloween. So I don't know. If you look at the fruits and stuff we got these days, we are so lucky. You look at the fruits from back in the day. Oh my God, their fruits were so terribly lame. Their fruits had it was like all seed and husk, and there was like no meat on the bones for the fruit. So yeah, farmers have achieved some amazing things by keeping the best plants and then having those grow and breed them with this and then keeping that. And selective breeding over the years, along with natural selection, has made some cool fruit, and the fruit is growing. So in the future, they're going to have bigger and bigger blueberries. I don't know if there's a limit, but this sounds like a joke, but it's like the most absurd sounding conspiracy theory, but it's not a conspiracy theory. I swear the blueberries are way bigger than they used to be. And I'm all for it. I completely approve of the big blueberries, unless they're doing some like super weird stuff with GMOs, which you can do totally normal, fine stuff with genetically modified stuff. That's not an inherently bad thing. But does have some risks on the environment and stuff. Unless they're doing something crazy with mutating them, I'm completely for the big blueberries. Make them bigger and bigger. I want to eat a blueberry with a fork and a knife on a dinner plate. But we're almost already there. They're making them so big these days. So anyway, we got this pumpkin. Here's this little lid right there. And I brought a scooping tool, and I forgot to bring a bucket to put it, so I'm going to scoop it right onto the desk, and then I'm going to deal with it after the stream. And so we need to scoop this stuff out so we can get his hat ready. Oh, I wonder if the squirrels are going to like these. Do squirrels eat pumpkin? I need to make sure it's not bad for them, too, because they're going to try and eat these. Okay, I need to mention the squirrel saga because it's relevant here. I used to feed the squirrels here occasionally. Then I was worried that I was giving them the nuts too often and maybe I didn't want them to not know how to hunt well and not teach the kids to go to humans and stuff. So I was like, I read more about it, and just the amount of times I'd done it, I started feeling like I should lay off this. I don't want to mess with the nature, really. They're not that natural. A lot of their diet is the fruits from my yard, and they're just like street fellas. They hang out right here. But I still was like, I should lay off on it. Then this other neighbor moved into the yard that this house shares with some other houses. There's a shared yard over there that I film a bunch of my stuff in. And in the shared yard, it's this other neighbor was feeding so many squirrels. She was going crazy. She was giving them just absurd amounts of walnuts. They were burying them everywhere. It was just like they had like 50 walnuts per day. They couldn't even eat them all. They were burying them, hiding them at every single place. And so it was still cool. It was, I don't mean any of that as a diss. She was a very nice lady, and she was very nice to the squirrels as well. So she, no problem with her or anything. But then she had to move. And so then the squirrels are like, where are the nuts? And they came to me, and I was like, okay, she gave my mom, who gave me the old nuts from the squirrel stuff, and or that she had left over, like a bunch of walnuts. And so I gave them a couple. Then it turns out it's the season where they had babies, and there's these tiny baby squirrels all over, and they're so cute. So I've spent a lot of time this week filming these tiny little baby squirrels. Mostly the teenager ones come out and are more comfortable, but the there's this also generation of these tiny little squirrels. And I got some really great clips of like a bunch of the teenage ones like playing around together and stuff. And they will show up a lot in the next episode because I also filmed a lot of title cards in front of them. I have actually been filming just as much as I ever have been of certain things, but I haven't filmed the right finished projects. I got sidetracked from putting out bonus stuff like I was, and I fall way too deep into habits, and there's a lot of complications with the house and other things. And so there's a lot of stuff that I've filmed that is going to be part of an episode or a bonus video or stuff, but I haven't put together in its final form yet. And one of those will maybe include a detailed squirrel saga, but you will at the very least see squirrels hanging out around title cards and stuff in the next video. Do not feed your local wildlife. I will explain more at some point the exact reasons why I feel okay sometimes giving a nut for these squirrels to eat. But as a general rule, do not do that. Only feed an animal if it is your pet, So now we have some comments. I haven't looked at the comments yet. If anyone's commenting a question or comment that they want me to respond to, I will look at them in a little bit. But I want to get a little further on the pumpkin, and I will look at the comments in not too long. Now, as I was saying, a lot of this video was sort of about the hidden importance of composite numbers. And with composite numbers and prime numbers as this multiplicative structure of things, I've found all of these unique traits, and when you look at the smaller numbers, it's not hard to find. Oh my god, that landed in the perfectly wrong spot. It landed on the candle. I've been finding all of these cool patterns that are like, with some of them for larger numbers, take a lot more to describe. But for smaller numbers, to find the type of fact where it was like, it just struck me, 9 is the first odd composite number. There are a lot of ones like that very close on the number line that give these character to different composites. Like 14 and 15 as neighbors are very interesting. They're the first two neighbors that have two distinct factors. Up until that point, if a number has more than one distinct different factor, its neighbors are prime powers, just a prime or a prime raised to a power. And in fact, you get a lot of prime powers at the beginning of the number line. Yet, 1 can be considered a prime power under many definitions. Then certainly 2, 3, 4, 5, not 6, 7, 8, 9, not 10. So interestingly, when you look at the first numbers from 1 through 11, 6 and 10 are the only ones that have more than one distinct factor. And that is very related to why we chose base 10 and why we should have chosen base 6. Oh my god, is base 6 beautiful. Anyone who is catching this, when you see someday a book from me out its title will have something along the lines of 3 even numbers related to the title. When you see my book about 3 even numbers, please get that, because writing has been like my main passion throughout my whole life. Like writing and music and filming stuff are all my passions, and they all somewhat go hand in hand. Combo class is extra focused on the filming side from what you see, but it's just as, and somewhat the music side, because I make the soundtracks to my videos, and I actually made some really cool new beats recently. Maybe I'll show in the stream or next stream or something, or in the next soundtrack. And but writing is a core aspect behind a lot of it. And so as I have written, oh, I got to remember to keep doing this. As I have written a bunch of stuff, there's a lot of it that will translate well to videos, and then there's some of it that won't. Some of it translates way better to a written book form. And so a lot of the facts that are going to be in my book, I will make videos, episode topics, bonus videos, try to get back into shorts soon and stuff. But because there's a bajillion, I've actually started tagging things of like, this would be a good short or something. And like every day I tag like 5 or 10 different things that I'm like, this would be a good short while I'm researching this stuff. So one day I'm just going to film an absurd amount of shorts and they're going to start all coming out again. But in general, with other stuff like that, some of them don't translate that well to that, meaning that I'm just hoping that anyone who has ever enjoyed a video from me, even if you don't think you like reading, even if it's the first book you ever get from a library or a bookstore or whatever, consider finding a way to read my Three of an Even book when it comes out, because people won't fully get it now. It's sort of for the aliens in the future, but I'm not kidding. This book will be very ahead of its time. It's going to be correct. You're going to see those prophecies. Sounds insane, but I have the math to show. The math, when you really go into seeing like base 6 versus base 10, I'm at the point where until I zoom back out and I'm like, oh, okay, on the big scale, they're relatively similar numbers. But on the small scale, oh my God, is 10 so lame and bad compared to 6, and 6 so beautiful and magnificent with the patterns you get. And a lot of it comes down to these gaps that you have with 10, where 3 and 7 have no factors in common with 10. And when you go up to 6, the only numbers that have no factors in common with 6 up to it are 1 and 5, the equivalent of 1 and 9 for 10. And those, as the neighbors, get some special traits, like how I mentioned 3 gets some cool traits by being a factor of the lower neighbor, the number 1 less than the base number we use. And so the neighbors do some easier things on their own, but base 10 has non-neighbor, what are called totatives. And that I will make, it relates to a very important function called Euler's totient function. That will show up in several videos, in fact, that I am filming and planning, that basically counts a level sort of beneath or beyond factors. Now, composite numbers are made up of factors. And while I wanted to praise composite numbers in this video, I also want to hint at a level beyond composite numbers, a level deeper we could look. Composite numbers are based on, when we look at the factors of a number, which things is it divisible by up to its size. But to be a factor of something, you have to go into that thing perfectly. And there are some ways in which it's notable for 10, for example, so that we can compare it to our base, that 10 has factors in common with 4, for example, or 8. 8 and 4 work a lot easier in our base than 3 and 7. That's because they have the factor of 2 in common with 10, despite them not being a factor of 10 themselves. So a very notable trait that's sort of underlooked are what's called totatives and cototatives, which are the numbers that are or aren't co-prime to a given number in the range up to that number. For example, in 10, we have the numbers that are its totatives are 1, 3, 7, and 9. The numbers up to it that don't have any factors in common with it. And, well, what do you know, if you look at a lot of patterns of totatives, there's a bunch that the only bases that can do something really magical and perfect with like no gaps or glitches or problems are the smallest few bases up to 4. So just like base 4, sometimes 2 or 3, and 6 win a lot of records of special things they can do when you analyze these traits. And skips five. Five can't do a lot of them. It's usually like two, three, four, and six or something that can do something special. But with the two, three, and four, you don't get to see it as clearly. It's like seeing a black and white image versus a colored image when you look at some patterns in binary versus base six. Base six has enough depth that you can like see color in these patterns, sort of. And it's a similar amount of color that we get in our base 10 one, but with such more elegant patterns of like the symmetries of when which color hits where and stuff. So that's something that I want people to keep in mind. Often when I mention this, people say, "Oh, have you seen the Jan Misali, if I'm pronouncing that right, video about this?" I think I've seen that back in the day, but I'm honestly not positive. I have seen some of their videos that are really cool, and I've either skimmed through the video or not. I have seen a website they made related to Base 6 that is completely on the right track. But just for anyone who has seen that and is curious, these investigations of mine related to Base 6 agree with all of the stuff I saw Jan Misali write about it. I'll check the video again sometime to confirm that, but go way further. So it's even if you think you know all of that stuff, I went like absurdly. There's no reason anyone else in history would have any reason, or you'd have to be insane to study the to study small primes in the particular ways I was doing the way I did to prove things about certain bases. You'd have to be insane to study them that long. So yeah, I guess that must prove that I'm the only sane person who does that and is the exception. But anyway, I when I make videos about that, they will be pretty big scale ones mixed with small facts. And I had a whole bonus video. I should have put it out a while ago, because now I didn't put it out because of this just little like terminology issue. A video I made related to this sort of thing. That's one of the cool patterns that only like the numbers up to 4 and 6, those mods or bases can pull off. I made a video about that, but I kept referring to this string that goes like 1, 2, 3, 2, 1 as a staircase. And the whole video, I'm like using staircase as this sort of like big descriptor of things. But then in the new main combo class video I'm making, it turns out I wanted to name something related to staircases. There's something staircase-esque that will be coming in the next main combo class episode related to me suggesting a term for a not really named, very, very underrated way of representing and viewing patterns and factors. That it's staircase related. And then I like started over analyzing, or maybe properly analyzing, that I was like, everyone is going to watch my bonus video about this, and then they're going to be like, oh, I already saw his video about staircases, because I kept ranting about this. And then I'll be like, they didn't see the even more important one. So all of that will come out. I have a lot of stuff filmed, but back to composites for now. Okay, well, actually, I need to take a 1-second break from the composites to figure out what am I going to carve in this. I think I'm just going to go for a typical face for now. It's a kind of low face because I chopped off the hat a bit too tall. So we're just going to go for a typical face because I really should not be too late out here. It's hard for me to not get excited on the live stream and just start talking really loud. And it's like almost 10:30. But anyway, I will also read the comments in a moment. First, let me just try and carve an eye or two. I will carve an eye. And, okay, no, wait. Do I have a better? Yeah, I brought a better tool. So I do have a better tool for this. Now I have this just thing right there. Maybe I'll go on the other side. I did bring a better tool. Maybe this would have been easier just to cut the top with too. But this is like a little sawing like thing. This is better for the smaller stuff I'm going to need to do. Now, let's hope we don't collide anything. Can we make a cool eye? How would I make a cool eye where I like see a little bit more detail? It's hard to make the center because it'll fall out if you don't do it right. I'm just going to do the simple eye for now. I can get another pumpkin in a few days. You know, if you don't care that much about when the official day of a holiday is, your pumpkins will be cheaper the day after Halloween, so I might go get some discount pumpkins and just do some more pumpkin carving another day. That's when the pumpkins are the cheapest, is right after Halloween. Anyway, though, about our good old composite and prime numbers, as I was starting to mention, 14 and 15 have this random trait where they're the first case where you have two numbers with distinct factors in a row. And it's sort of very interesting to think, okay, so on our number line, it happens, feels like a coincidence until you look a little deeper, that 2 times 7 happens to be right next to 3 times 5. If you were just that's part of the mystery of primes. If you were just asked something like, okay, that the third prime is 5 and the fourth prime is 7 and stuff, but then, what is bigger? 5 times 5 times 2 or 7 times 3 times 3 or something, some of these things, it's not instantly, intuitive that that should land at that point in the number line. But when you look at the small ones, you can see sort of where their pattern lands. Small numbers, you can sort of, looking at the first 20 or 30 numbers, actually 30 is a good amount because it's a good mod to wrap this around in. If you look at the first 30 numbers, you can sort of have, a small enough thing that your brain can hope to capture the whole pattern that you're looking at. And see when sorts of things emerge for the first time, and you'll notice that all the small numbers have cool traits. It's, they're all like the first to do something notable. As you get higher up, you could still do that, but it would take a lot more stretches. You'd have to be a lot more like, this is the first number with 3 factors that's neighbors with something that's a square. You'd have to, start being a little more arbitrary seeming with what you're first at. But they all have those neat traits. Then that's just looking at sort of like what we could almost call mod infinity as we're looking at the whole number line. But then when we go into what are called mods, where we sort of wrap around a set of numbers like a clock, where those are like remainders in a way, where let's say I'm looking at how much more than the latest multiple of 30 something is. So I would count up to 30, and then but 30, I wouldn't say 30, I'd say 0, because that's 0 more than the previous multiple of 30. Then I would count up again. You may also, and that's the typical way of doing mods, but sometimes you get way cooler results when you're like, wait a minute, what if we included negative values? What if I called 29 -1 because it's 1 under a 30? So in circumstances like that, you can take, either way works. The negative values sometimes provide some really interesting symmetry. But let's look at positive values for this analogy. If I'm looking at the set of numbers from 0 to 29 in conjunction to 30, we'll find that some of them have notable traits related to the totatives and cototatives I was mentioning before, and how if I take mod 6, we'll notice, like I said, the only numbers that don't have any factors in common with 6 are 1 and 5. And those are the neighbors. We could call them 1 and -1 in the mod, based on their distances from the nearest multiple of 6. Well, when I pattern that to mod 30, we copy that and get a little extra. By extra, I mean, it actually looks like less here. We get extra of the cototatives, which are the opposite ones. When we go to mod 30, we start eliminating more places where things like primes could be. Primes can only live at a spot that's co-prime to the base, because they would have to be at a spot that's co-prime to all of the bases except for themselves, or 1, if you were doing mod 1, which, we're just not going to do mod 1, because that all whole numbers are congruent to 0 in mod 1. They're all 0 away from a multiple of 1. But if we look at, and for anyone who doesn't know this sort of thing, think about sometime, if you've never heard about modular arithmetic or whatever, mod 2 is essentially the pattern of even and odd numbers. Right now I'm describing it in distance from the latest multiple of something, but essentially odd numbers are the numbers that are congruent to 1 in that mod. And so let's say we have the club of 0 through 30, or 0 through 29 in mod 30, and we're wondering, where could primes live in the number line? maybe I know a random spot on the number line and I know its distance above a multiple of 30, like 907. I know that's 7 more than a multiple of 30. That's pretty easy to calculate, you know. Well, 30 works really well, it turns out, because it's a primorial. It's the product of the first three primes. And it extends 6, because 6 is also a primorial. 6 is the product of the first two primes. And then when we pattern like a bunch of sixes to a 30, five different sixes in a row, where we're like, we could be the first or fifth. What would the next first or fifth be? Okay, that would be seventh or 11th, based on like imagining a bunch of sixes where the first and fifth of these blocks of 6 are put on. Then we also eliminate a little extra in mod 30 because we eliminate spots where 5s are, and some of those were already eliminated. But now we'll find in mod 30, we know that a number cannot be 5 more than a multiple of 30, unless it's the 0th multiple of 30. But, you know, multiple of 30 that is 30 or larger. A number cannot be 5 more than those, because then it's definitely a multiple of 5 itself. 30 was, adding the extra 5, still divisible. And so it's not the only trait you can measure, but a good analogy for why those spots are important are there where primes could live. And that is true, among other reasons they're important. So mod 30 is a quite interesting one there. It's a primorial, and you get a very good ratio of how many co-totatives you have. You get a smaller ratio of totatives, where less spots that act glitchy in a way. Now, these spots where primes live, in most contexts, we would want to reduce those for a base that we use. They're the messy spots. We want spots that have factors in common with the base. And additionally, reducing these would make it easier to prime hunt. If, just in a simple way to think in your head, okay, I need to figure out real quick, is that number a prime? It would be so much easier in base 6. It would be almost twice as easy, because every prime has to end in a 1 or a 5 in that base, every prime larger than the base number. But in our base, every prime larger than the base number can end in a 1, 3, 7, or 9. It's twice as many options. So, and additionally, those spots are just worse. The numbers that end in those digits in our base are the messy ones. Those are the harder ones to multiply with, to divide with, and stuff. So, which is 1, 3, 7, or 9 as an ending digit to our base. That's not the only trait that makes things important, and some other traits that could make a number important are like, that was primorial related, but some things are also factorial related. And guess what? 6 is also a factorial. So there's sort of like one path of important things that goes on, that goes 1, 2, 6, 24. But then you might have the primorials, where you're multiplying all the primes up to some point instead of just all the whole numbers, just the primes. And that'll go 1, 2, 6, 30. There are other paths where 1, 2, 6 goes elsewhere, such as the superior highly composites begin with, not technically 1, but they go 2, 6, 12 in that case. And there's so many really notable sequences that go 2, 6, and then some other multiple of 6. There's even more if I allow 2, 4, 6 as the beginning. Even more fit that, but the 2, 6 ones are sort of pure, and some like the superior highly composites. Or that's a good example, is the normal highly composites have 2, 4, 6 there, and the superiors have 2, 6 straight to there. I began thinking of these different sequences as, what prime factors are we tossing into the mix? Remember how I said like composites are mixes of ingredients? Well, if we have one composite, we can turn it into another by changing an ingredient or by adding or subtracting. So to go up many sequences that were relevant here, sequences such as the factorials, the primorials, one of the ones I made in a bonus video here as well that I said should have deserved the name factorial, where it's the least common multiple of the first some amount of numbers. So for example, 7 factorial, multiply all the numbers to 7, you get 720. And is that right? Yeah, 720, is that 7 factorial? Yeah. No. 7 factorial is 5040. 6 factorial is 720. I did multiply that again to remember. So 7 factorial, we've got 5040. And 7 primorial would just be 2 times 3 times 5 times 7, 210. The least common multiple sequence would be what number is the smallest number that is divisible by 1 through 7. Actually gives you a different answer than either of those sequences. In that case, it's 420. So, classic meme number. Now, maybe I need to look deep into whether these new meme numbers are cool or not. Everyone's talking about like 6, 7 and stuff. Is that, if I were to analyze whether that's important, it's separate, I guess. They put the 6 and the 7 separate because my opinion on 6, 7 is 6 is the better one. 7's the overrated one. It's all about the 6 in there. As a number, 67, I don't know. I would have to look into that. But, 420 is our classic meme number, one of the classics. And that one happens to be the least common multiple of the first 7 numbers. And so those sequences sprout different places, but guess what? They all have 2 then 6 at the beginning. And it is because each of those sequences, each new term is going to be, in some ways of writing them, some terms can repeat, meaning we just multiplied them by 1 or whatever to get to the next term. Other ones only show distinct versions, like for primorials, do we count 6 primorial as different than 5 primorial, even though they have the same answer? So you might have duplicates, but apart from the duplicates, each of term in there multiplies by a prime to get to the next spot. And the question is, how are we going to, imagine we start from nothing. We're going to add an ingredient, add an ingredient, add an ingredient. And we may have different goals. Maybe we want a really divisible number in this way, like divisible a lot of factors. Maybe we want a number that's divisible in a different way, like it has fewer totatives or other traits. Well, when we're going in these different ingredient throwing-ins, to make almost all of the cool types of sequence related to divisibility, you gotta throw in a 2 first. You need to start with the 2. It's the only logical option, the first prime. It would be crazy to start with a prime that wasn't the first prime. Then, sometimes you're going to throw in another 2. That might be what a lot of people expect. You got your powers of 2, but way more often to make the cool sequences, you throw in a 2, throw in a 3, throw in another 2, and then throw in a 5. Something along those lines. Oh, and also when I said each one is a prime times the last, it's not always a prime because the factorials multiply a straight up whole number by it. So for example, now that if I throw in a 2, then a 3, we're at 6, we've multiplied. In some logic, you're like, okay, I've done a 2, then a 3. Next, I should do 4. I'm just going up the whole numbers. Times 1, times 2, times 3, times 4. That's the factorials. Kind of logical. But if we were looking at them as like prime indices, then we'd be like, okay, I did first prime, second prime, now let's do third prime. That's the primorials. But we also could see it in ways where we're like, okay, 2, 3, our next whole number is a 4. But maybe we want to use one of its prime factors that's a 2. Because when we have 2 and 3 so far, we have prime factor of 2, prime factor of 3. If we had a 4 that we're considering, that is made up of 2 times 2. And we already encountered 1, 2, but we didn't encounter a second 2 in the mix until 4. So maybe we should add one of those 2s, like catch up to the amount total. Maybe our total amount of 2s in the mix should be able to handle this new number. And that would actually lead you more to that LCM sequence, the least common multiple one, the one I think should have been called the factorials, which we can call the prime powerials or something because it relates to the prime powers. And with there was I need to relook, but I asked viewers if they wanted to leave a comment, if they had any suggestions for the name. And my favorite, when I looked, I need to relook, so I'm not going to confirm this is my favorite or the name I'm going to use, but my favorite I recall that I saw was a viewer commented on that video, the suggestion, the permutorials, because factorials relate to permutations. Or was that it? No, that was their suggestion for what the factorials should be called, and then this one gets the name factorials. Okay, so yeah, no, that would have been a better system. Factorials called the permutorials, and this one gets to be called the factorials because it has more to do with factors than the factorials. But that would change. That's the suggestion for the completely alternate system. I forget if I had a favorite of in our current system, assuming we're still using factorials, what we'd call this new one. I'll call them the prime powerials for now, because what you do is essentially whenever a new prime power comes, you multiply just one instance of the prime that it's a power of, because you have the rest. By which I mean, when I get to 12, if I have ingested or added ingredients of all the things up to there, I have encountered all the prime factors in 12. I've encountered a pair of twos and a three. If I get to 16, though, I've never encountered four twos. I've encountered up to three of them at a time in the eight, but I've never at once in one number encountered four twos. So that's the first time we need to get our fourth two, but that only adds one. So we're just going to, if I'm making this LCM sequence, what I do is whenever I hit a new prime power, those are the ones I need to get something new from. And it's only going to be one instance of the prime that they're the power of. So when I get to 25, the 25th term of this would be 5 times the last term. The 26th term would be the same because that's not a prime power. We're going to already have all the factors of it covered. And so in different ways, these sort of make sense as a natural way. If I say, I throw in a 2 multiplicatively, what do I do next? Maybe we treat it as one of those 3 sequences or any number of other sequences, but we'll find we very often throw in a 2, then a 3, then another 2, then a 5, which that specifically, that diverges for most of those. That might stick with the least common multiple sequence for a minute, but really the best mix, if you want pure divisibility, I would have to say would be the set of, there's only 15 of these numbers that are the set that match 2 different really big scale definitions called superior highly composite numbers and colossally abundant numbers. The 15 numbers that are both of those are like the kings of divisibility. After that, the sequences diverge in their like recommendations of what ingredients you add when. But for those first 15, under many, many metrics, to make a divisible number, you start off with multiplying 2, then 3, then 2, then 5. Then another 2, actually, before you get your 7. And not that much later, you get your second 3. So that's a really interesting list, is the list of prime numbers that are the ratios between either the superior highly composite numbers, which have a slightly more complicated definition than the highly composites, but it's related to numbers that maximize this ratio of divisibility, and the colossally abundant numbers, which are another way of defining that, and which diverge after the 15th term. But those 15, oh boy, those 15 numbers are numbers that, let me just find an example of one of these myself to tell you folks that these are, one sec, the superior highly composites that are bigger than the ones that we would use as a base. I am almost sure there are aliens somewhere in the universe that count one of these ways. And I'm not saying that like aliens, like I'm not saying more than half of aliens would count like us, but somewhere out there, I bet there's intelligent life. I don't know how close it is, but somewhere out there, there's probably some alien that counts in a base-like way like us. And I bet you there are ones that are using the other superior highly composite numbers. If you were an alien with a really big brain that could store a ton of digits, and you had a way of writing digits super fast, and you didn't mind a massive multiplication table of patterns, you might use something like base 55,440. Exactly. That is, if we knew aliens were counting in a base that was between 50,000 and 60,000, I would put so much money on it being 55,440. So, and the next one's kind of neat looking in our base. The 10th superior highly composite, 720,720. And old videos, 720p. Do you remember like that old video quality? There's a reason it's 720. 720, great number. And it all comes down to 6, product of the first 6 whole numbers. And anyway, I need to finish up this pumpkin, and I made one weird eye so far, and I need to make it a little more eye-like, and then I'll make the other eye. And so, ouch. Okay. Oh, I know I keep saying that I'll read the comments in a second, but I will after this eye and before the mouth. Okay, that is going to be an issue. I don't want to intersect that because there's like a little already cut bit there. So this eye is going to have to go a little further and carefully. I feel like that is a decent set of eyes. Maybe, yeah, that'll work. Let me give them a little more room, like make them curved a little more the other way. Okay. All right. Actually, I'm just going to do the mouth really quick, and then I'll look at the comments when I put the light in here. As I should probably either wrap up or go inside. Let me see how carried away I get with comments and stuff as for whether I wrap up or go inside. But I don't want to bug the neighbors. My neighbors are cool, so I don't want to be like keeping their kids up and stuff. Okay, 1 second. I'm trying to give it some teeth. Okay, I don't know how this is working. I was trying to give it teeth and it got all crooked, but it's gonna work. I need to go higher up. Delete the teeth strategy. Okay, now I made a smaller mouth to begin. Then I can like try and add stuff. I can like turn it into a bigger mouth. But this is like at least the center of the mouth hole. Okay. He looks like he's in agony or something. We should make it a little happier. Let's try and curve this smile up a bit. Oh, that is crazy how much that corner changed. It's like, I'm happy now. Okay. Okay. I think that should work for now. I may make some adjustments later on my own time, but I'm not going to be able to make a perfect pumpkin for now. I may also do another live stream because I like Halloween season, the season of celebrating the giant berries, where I get some used pumpkins because they're going to be really cheap right now, now that Halloween's done. The stores aren't going to need their pumpkins anymore. And make some mathematical ones or some other activities. But for now, since it is Halloween, if you're me, you gotta try and make one of these. Now, I have another candle to put in. Let me dig a little divot for the candle to live in. Because it needs to like sit in there. Okay, let's see if I can get the candle to stay there. Where's my other candle? Because this candle right here is completely melted. Look at this one. This is the candle right there. So that certainly is not going to work in there. Well, actually, this might work really well. Look at this candle. Whoa, oops. I broke the candle. Okay, I'm going to stop messing with it. I'm going to destroy it. Okay, let's see. Now, the trick about these, though, is when you light them, you got to get the other lights off to really see them. They're not going to look that good when other lights are on. So I'm going to have to blow out this can. That's what we'll try and transport it in. If I can't transport it in, oh, that'll happen. It's, equivalent to blowing it out. Now, let me turn this off. This is right. I had back there, so now we're extra dark. Now, we shall see. Oh, I forgot the lid fell back there. See, now I can grab the microphone when I go on a mission. Isn't that cool? Now I can, you can still hear me, I think, as I go over here behind the camera to grab this top of the pumpkin. So, let's see how this works. Yeah, that's not bad. Got a little smiling fella. That's pretty nice looking. Okay, so maybe I'll edit it a little more on my own time, make it extra good, but yeah, it's working for now. I like this little fella. Now, let me take a peek at our chat. I will maybe end up ranting a bit more about composite numbers based on what gets referenced in the chat, but this is sort of just the tip of the iceberg of a lot of my future videos will relate to primes and composites and some traits about them, and at least the upcoming batches of videos. And I want people to remember going into them this dichotomy where composites are not just the non-primes, but they are also these sets of primes as far as their factors, or their prime factors. It smells like burning pumpkin. It smells kind of good, but I hope it's not like bad for me to be inhaling all that. But it straight up smells like burning pumpkin right now. Okay. Anyway, let me take a peek at our chat. And to anybody who leaves while I'm talking to chat, do make sure to tune into whatever next videos, especially on my main combo class channel, but here as well. And I love you folks all so much, and I am genuinely very disappointed in both myself and my situation that I haven't been able to be posting. But trust me, I've still been working on combo class, and now I just have more and more stockpiles of ideas than ever. So as I fully figure out how to get back into a good groove of space and time to be churning out more bonus videos again, the ideas are certainly ready. Now, going through our comments, we have some cool comments related to my original thoughts about factors, and some clarifications, which are always helpful, like writing down some of the things I was having, and some cool thoughts from It's Phoenixing Time. And we have some agrees about 7, not very good in base 10. Another notable thing about 7 verse 3, 7 in the first 10 numbers is co-prime, meaning no factors larger than 1 in common with all of the other 10 numbers, not just 10 itself, but every other number in the range up to 10 has no factors larger than 1 in common with 7. Now, these are traits that are inevitable when you get to a large enough base, but we don't need a large base. 6 is perfectly good at working it, and it doesn't have those gaps. 7 in base 6, the quantity 7, because the digit doesn't exist, the quantity 7 is equivalent to R11 in terms of its easiness of patterns. The prime 5 is equivalent to R9, the number 1 less or 1 more than the base for those two. And the fact that 6 has its prime factors are the first 2 primes, and then it is neighbors with the next 2 primes, makes it pretty good with all of the first 4 primes, which is spectacular for a number of its size. Not to mention that when you take that 2 and 3 that are its factors, and you add times 1, which we can always do that for fun if we want. Well, here that shows us 1 times 2 times 3 equals 1 plus 2 plus 3, if you go through that and connect it. And as we connect that and see all that, we will find that, sorry, I got confused because my thing is delayed here. Okay, I got it caught up there. Just my view of what was happening. Okay, I'll save. I'm getting distracted about a lot of thoughts that lead to this whole rabbit hole of, a lot of it is calculations and graphs and tables that sort of show the picture of just some of them even visually, like, isn't this one beautiful and this one messy or whatever? So I will show more of those over time, and I will recommend to anyone who wants to do their own investigations in the near future. What you could try is some traits that are notable would be, what if you look at like a multiplication table in a base, but just the last digits that are going on? What if you did something similar, but instead of modularly, which that would sort of turn to, you included negative values for the ones in the upper half of the range, treating the one less than the top as a -1, and so on. What if you color coded things? What patterns would you see form in different mods and stuff? And the mod 6 multiplication table, and even the whole base 6 multiplication table with all the digits, very neat and nice. But there's also other bases that are good in different ways. There's cool traits that, not for what I would recommend for a human to use as a base, but for what I would recommend in other circumstances, are the prime numbered bases or prime powers. There are other good aspects of using a base like 7 or 11, for an example, a prime of a decent size. And there are other things that can be good when you use a prime power of a small prime, such as 8 or 9. Um, then the ones that are good for human bases are often ones that want to incorporate more divisibility by having more different distinct factors. But which order you put those factors is so interesting, and there's so many different ways we could build. Like, what is the next logical base after 2? Sort of like in those sequences where I said we go 2 and then we often go to 6. Well, I'll add, not only do we often want to go to 2 from 6, but it is an absurdly low amount of the time that if we don't go to 6, that we go to 10. It's like, it, it's not a lot of the big points about why base 6 is better. End up the mood of them, not like the proof, because they do contain meat on the bones as well or whatever, but the mood of them ends up being like, but just why would you do that? Like, that 10 is an unnecessary stretch. And a lot of it boils down to, why the heck would you make your recipe start with the first prime, but then throw in the third prime? And no second prime. Second prime doesn't get to be in the mix. Lots of good comments, so I can't comment on all of the It's Phoenix Time comments, but thank you for leaving your thoughts and clarifications. We also have some more requests for pumpkin carving, which we have gotten to, although this one stalled out. And we have a question. Somebody says, is 22733 composite or prime? Now, the way I would go through that is, first, I know it doesn't end in one of the digits of our base, so I could run a few quick tests, such as the Threven test, adding up the digits. And by adding up the digits, I can see it's not a Threven digit sum, and that tells me it's not Threven, so the number is not divisible by 2, 3, or 5. So I'm not sure. I would have to test a lot more to figure out if that number is composite or prime, but I can pretty quickly verify that it's not divisible by 2, 3, or 5. I have made a video back in the day about if you ever want to be able to very quickly identify a number that is up to 100, or in fact up to 120. That is very easy. 120 being notable, not even because it's a divisible number, but for a separate reason, because 1 less than 11 squared. And so if you give me a number less than 120, I'll be real quick at telling you. But which these numbers are so important, because since numbers are built from other numbers, small numbers show up more. It's just like, if you're gonna look at the multiplicative structure of things, which certainly happens. You have dozens of eggs, you have packs of 10s and 12s and stuff. Certainly things come in, there's a box of 2 that has 4 of these in it, and they each have 8 of these or whatever. So when we have a bunch of stuff multiplied together, small stuff's going to come up way more often. And if you imagine something like a 3-dimensional box that has 3 different whole number dimensions, let's say they have to be distinct from each other, the chance that you have one of them even or one of them threeven is preposterously high, which makes the whole product be that particular thing. And so you're going to see small primes show up a lot in different sorts of numbers if you look at the multiplicative structure, like how there are a lot of formulas where you'll see a 6 or a 24 pop up. Why did those ones pop up? It's because factorials show up in a lot of formulas, and that's 1 times 2 times 3 showed up, or 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 showed up. And So those are, if we see a 24, in some ways, it's actually Noah factorials going on, and the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 were important. So sometimes, like the small numbers are what makes up something we think of as a bigger number. And in some ways, I've grown to think of, in the right context, it's not something you permanently want to feel like, but in certain contexts, feeling like 6 is almost a nickname for 2 and 3 hanging out. And 12 is sort of a nickname for 2 and another 2 and a 3 hanging out. And so, in a way, that's the view of composites are not the non-primes only. They are also, but they're not only the non-primes, they're also the sets of primes. Now, this guy, oh, the candle's actually still lit. It's just in the corner. It just fell. It's still lit. Oh no. No. Ah, this is a really hard angle to do this. Okay. Okay, that's not going to work. Sorry. We'll come back to having that lit in another video or something else. And we have other cool comments that I can't comment on all of them. Somebody asked about all the clocks. That will be a long story, but of course, we need a lot of stop clocks. They need to all be, what I will explain. I won't explain why there's so many. I'll explain why they are stopped. Because a non-stopped clock is always going to be a little off. The stopped clocks are right twice a day, exactly right. Whereas a non-stopped clock might take centuries for a clock that is 1 second fast to ever become on time. And so, just by discrepancies in the gears or whatever. And so these clocks are right, millions of times more often than most people's clocks. Most people's clocks are always trailing a second ahead or a second behind. These clocks are right millions of times more often than the average moving clock. Also, because I froze time here, that's the other reason. And a lot of other cool ones that, so we have a hey from the Bay. I'm actually from the Bay too. Hey, I wonder where you are from in the Bay. I have mentioned this before, but I am actually in Berkeley. So I'm not in the college institution, but I'm in that city. But yeah, the Bay is great. I love it here. The only reason I would want to move here is because insanity happening in the country, but I love the Bay Area. It's great here. And somebody clicked on the wrong stream and cannot understand math. I think my videos have the potential to get non-math lovers to like math, but maybe not the live streams as much. For a non-math lover, someone who doesn't like math at all, to get into math, I think one of my main combo class episodes could do well on that. But a live stream where I'm ranting about composites, this is the sort of thing that I guess assumes a little more prerequisite knowledge. Now, there are certain forces in the world who are trying to dumb down the population on purpose by destroying educational curriculum and educational, groups and so on. And so perhaps over time, I'm going to have to assume less of what I expect as a default that people know. Like right now, I assume, okay, most of my viewers probably know at least math through middle school, let's say, and often I'll assume they probably know through high school, not always necessary. But, and if you're younger, that's fine. But that's just like my assumption of what the prerequisite knowledge might be. And so over time, that might shrink. Like, what if it's, I expect that people know how to do certain things because I learned those in middle school or high school, but we might see it shrink. It might be bad. I might have to start being like, okay, and by the way, here's your reminder on how to use parentheses if those are a foreign concept to you. But at some point, maybe it'll just be necessary for me to make a actual grade 1 where it's actually first grade. We're doing the negative grades. Those are the fun ones. Those are the crazy ones. We're coming back from the grade -3 glitch but maybe someday I'll do a real grade 1. It's like actual first grade. But now we're in negative grades for now. We're still in grade -3. There was just a weird glitch around grade pi, but I'll explain that more later. Um, and somebody said Euler's totient function. They're not sure how to spell it. If anyone is curious in the future, that is what I was referencing, but it is spelled Totient. But the totient function, to just get the terminology right, counts them, whereas sometimes people use that term, but to be more correct about the specific ones, they are called the totatives, which are a specific number smaller than another number and co-prime to it. But the totient function counts them, essentially. So the totient of 6 would be 2, counting that 1 and 5 are co-prime to it. And we have a question from somebody who's preparing for IITG. I don't really know. I think that's one of the exams, possibly in India. So I don't actually know that much about that. Let me know if that's right or wrong if you're still watching, if it's an exam possibly in the Indian system. I'm not sure. I, maybe some other sort of exam. I'm not fully familiar with that name, although it rings a bell. But my tips are to, if you're studying for something, read about it, write down while you're reading. If possible, read it from other sources, and if possible, even write it in different ways or describe it to yourself in different ways. Perhaps imagine that you had to describe it to someone. Perhaps say, I'm going to write it down as if I wanted it to make sense to somebody who didn't know as much about this as even me right now or you right now. And because sometimes teaching can get you extra concrete in your knowledge of something, having to figure out how you would phrase it. And so brainstorming my videos teaches me a lot because I get lost in learning extra through the figuring out of how should I phrase this such that it makes sense. And so there's a lot of different ways I could phrase it. I don't know the exact exam. My biggest recommendations are take notes while you read. So write down random stuff, can be phrased however, it does not need to be in a formal way at all. It just needs to be something you need to be able to read. Try to come back to those notes and think about later, read through it again, pause for some hours or a day if you can, come back to it and be like, okay, how do I feel about these notes? Is there anything that I would add, or is there anything I feel like I wrote wrong that I should rewrite? And maybe say it out loud even. But the key to it is just reading it many times. And if you write it and say it, it sort of speeds up the process of making it concrete in your memory. Another good thing would be if it's the type of, I don't know the type, but if it's the type of exam that requires more of logic, like you may need to solve a problem that's not fully memorization based, try some of those sorts of problems, give yourself a random example you think you might see on the test, and see how would I fare if I had to deal with this right now. I can give some other recommendations later, perhaps. We have a question if there's a fractal pattern behind the sum of consecutive cubes equals sum squared theorem. Now, that's a little vague when you're asking about is there a fractal pattern, because depending how we view many mathematical structures, almost any infinite pattern that has change within it, we could find some way to phrase it in a fractal-like way. Some would just require much more stretches. But if you mean fractal in sort of the more common pure sense of something fully self-similar, something that fully contains a copy of itself, which contains a copy of itself, I'm not sure on exactly what you mean by the fractal connection there, but I do want to note that that pattern will show up in my next video. It's sort of near the end because it's not a main part of my next video, but there might be a bonus video or stuff before this. But when I say next video, I mean next main combo class episode on my other main combo class channel. That one, there will be that pattern showed near the end of the video because it ties in to some other, it's actually really related to the video in a really cool way. So I don't know if you're thinking of a similar pattern to the visualization of that I will show, but I filmed Dice doing something related to that. Well, it was actually a while ago by now because I'm still trying to put together the episode. But in the past month, I have filmed Dice doing stuff about that will be in a video soon. And A fractal pattern? I'm not sure exactly what you're referring to, but it's a great question, asking if there is a fractal pattern, and something is always, a good place to look. There are certainly fractal patterns in many numerical things related to digits or related to divisibility. For example, if you look at the highest, what is the power of 2 exponent in a number's prime factorization? Like, could be 2 to the 0th power or first power, second power, whatever. That does a fractal shape if you go up the number line. Certain things about digits in any base do a fractal shape, sort of the way that you have, like, we count up to 10, then we count up to 10 within 10, then count up to 10 within 10. As far as the pattern you're mentioning, which is related to summing cubes being able to be expressed as squaring a triangular number, um, there's the comment is clarifying that they discovered that theorem by themselves and it freaked them out. Good job discovering it. That's always fun. One of my favorite things is when I'm working on random math and I stumble into some sort of identity that ends up having the details online, but I'm like, cool, I found that. That'll make you always more comfortable with something. Like, you will know something 20 times better in your intuitive part of your brain if you did work to see it emerge. And it doesn't have to be like before you read about it. You can read about it and then, like, try to trigger that, even, come back to it when you don't fully remember it and try and make it emerge. Or even if you know all the spoilers, just go through the steps. But seeing something emerge can, show you its origin, not its only origin, but give you one concrete origin for it. Now, and they were saying they used a base 2 representation using polynomials and saw too many coincidences. There's lots of beautiful patterns there, so I'm not sure exactly what you mean, and I'm not going to have time in this stream to fully check what you are referring to there. I will say you will definitely be interested in that portion of the next main combo class episode that goes into most of the next combo class episode is about shapes of numbers, but for the majority, it's about 2D shapes. So like the dice I'm using, we are looking at the front face of them, each dice being one unit. But near the end, it goes toward 3D shapes that have some similarities and that have this really cool connection related to what you're mentioning. So you'll enjoy that. If you want to check in the next live stream I do or leave a comment on something, I could maybe try and look into that and check it out later, because it does sound quite interesting. Gotta love fractals and bases and all that. They also mention, this is from Arthur Villarreal 102, that they self-study and don't have much guidance. There is nothing wrong with self-studying because there is an abundance of resources on the internet and in libraries. So if you, or bookstores. So, getting a few paper books from libraries or bookstores, as well as a bunch of articles that you can find online. There is so many good resources if you know where to look and how to, study things, and you just spend a little time finding certain corners that you don't need a formal education necessarily. It can help, it can be a shortcut, but I don't have a formal education. I took 2 years of college and then quit to become a music teacher. But because I love reading about things and taking notes about things, and I happen to be the type of person, I'm not recommending this or anything, but I happen to be the type of person who learns more outside of school, who learns faster when I'm just given time to read and write about it, as opposed to, in those circumstances, my professor is whoever wrote the article. And so that is something that works for me. Will not work for everybody. I am very self-motivated to study things, so it won't work for everybody. But all I'm saying is I can relate to that, and don't worry if you don't have a guidance in terms of like a formal teacher or professor or whatever. In the modern age, there are many bad things about the internet and globalization and all that. There are also many good things. And one of the best things is the things like Wikipedia, honestly. As you know, obviously you don't want to trust Wikipedia on the same level as many other sources, but if you read the sources it has linked, or you just use it as a way to find the names of topics you like, just going through a rabbit hole, this links to that, this links to this, just to even just find the names of things. Resources like that are really great. And the one that I have really been into recently Where I've been finding some really underrated articles is try to find on the OEIS, the Online Encyclopedia of Integer Sequences, sequences related to what you're studying, and look in their links for what articles they have in their links for that sequence. And it will relate to facts in the comments sometimes, but I have found some really cool articles, really underrated stuff by searching a string of digits, like a string of numbers that relate to something I found, having that on the OEIS link me to a particular sequence that was maybe a different way of getting to those numbers that has been more studied, and looking in their comments and links. So, but there are many places to study online, uh, tons of great stuff, and I am a quite pro stuff like Wikipedia educator, as long as you don't use it as your final source or anything, as a place, a jumping off point to discover connections and discover, like I said, just even the name, this topic exists. Now I know that there is something called so and so that is studied within this realm. Just to even find stuff like that. Any sort of resource like that. Like it could be Wikipedia, or it could even be like a social media corner, maybe like a subreddit or some forum or something. Even things like that can be good. If you find yourself motivated to study any place, as long as you treat some things as more trustworthy as a final source, in the intermediate stage, not everything needs to be a final source. You can read a lot of opinions, you can read a lot of connections that might be true, and have it, steer you and sort of sculpt your knowledge. Really, ideally, you'll understand something when you've seen it read and expressed many different ways. Like, by now, I have all these different views of square numbers in my head, all these different ways you could define them, all these different things you could call their coolest pattern in a different way. And in different contexts, you'll discover them so many different ways. So there's not going to be a singular thing that, like a lot of college classes are going to steer toward one particular goal, which can be helpful. But, as you're studying on your own, putting together a whole web of knowledge, it's sort of like a tree. You're sort of this connects to that, connects to that, connects to that. And, when you're creative enough, you can connect almost any of the branches, but some of them are more directly related as this tree you sort of build familiarity with. Additionally, there's sort of a bell, the bell curve meme where it's like the bottom guy and the top guy say the same thing. It's like where it's like when you have almost none or almost all, you're at the same level, compared to the middle does something different. Um, there's sort of that for how much people will say they know of mathematics. You may hear me say I know a lot about number theory. And maybe in a casual sense, like if I'm compared to other people, I'll be like, yeah, I know a lot of math. But if asked, like, okay, what portion of mathematics do you think you understand? Like, what, amount of the realm of mathematics do you understand? I would say, oh, a miraculously tiny amount, because there is no human on earth knows even 10% of the mathematical findings that are out there in this interconnected web. There's a single paper. The classification of finite simple groups is more than 10,000 pages, and there's probably a dozen people on the planet who understand it and who have read the whole thing and got it. And so, with that, the bell curve thing I was mentioning is that if you ask someone how much of mathematics do they know, somebody who knows a medium amount of mathematics might be like, I know like half of it. I know half of math. But somebody who knows very little or who knows a lot will probably say, oh, math is way bigger than any human brain could get all of. So if you're, I don't know if you have a goal, if you're studying for a particular job or school or whatever. If you are just studying for you enjoy math, or you may want to steer toward some form of thing related to it, then just go wild, just crazy, study every source, take every note, just anywhere. No bad source, as long as you don't treat it as your final one, as long as you don't trust it off the bat. Reading anything, as long as your mind's in the right spot, is good. So it's like, just go crazy, read stuff from all sorts of sources, take notes, and sculpt a view of which sources you find more useful and more trustworthy. Now, media literacy is very important, and in the modern age of AI, I might have to do like a whole lecture course about it, but it's very important to remember. First of all, people will say wrong stuff confidently online. uh, Especially if you're talking to like like the chat robots and stuff. Do not try and learn math from one of those. No, I go on those as a joke sometimes to test, is it still like the worst ever at math? And it is. It can regurgitate 2 plus 2 equals 4, but if you ask it other things, you can't tell when it goes to the I am straight up lying and just guessing and just making up stuff and just like not double checking it. And it'll tell you things like it double checked and it didn't. So do not learn from one of those robots. They will directly lie to you about how confident they are about something, and they'll just fill your head with trash. It made me really, really annoyed when I asked one time Chat GPT. I asked it a question a while ago, and after this basic question, its response was, "What a brilliant question. That is so a brilliant thought. Would you like me to write a paper about it for you to publish?" It's what the why is this robot like when you go to papers in the future, are they just going to be clogged with all this robot nonsense? Because a lot of people believed it. Like, if you were gullible, the robot's like, "Here, you want to get famous? You're a genius. Here, you want me to write you a math paper?" But the robot's papers are nonsense and filled with gibberish. And it's just a huge waste of time for any mathematician to have to begin reading the paper and go, "Oh, this is one of the ones written by one of the robots," right? And when they hit that realization, they're like, "Oh no, the rest of this is absolute trash." They're not using logic because they're just using what is the most likely next word. And so that was a sidetrack, but do not study from those things. You can use them to try and format data, but that is the extent of what I would use it for mathematically, is like, put these in a table. Even if it does that, double check the table. It'll probably screw you on purpose. I literally was getting some footage not that long ago to make another video about how awful some of those are, because although I've already covered that, the new thing is whenever you Google something, that one pops up on Google, and the Google one is wrong so often. And I can't believe that it's just like, I'll search any mathematical thing, and before you get to any of the pages online about it, there's this giant wrong answer. And it's why the ways it's wrong are so dishonest and idiotic, that like dishonest from the creators of it, and just so dumb of how it acts, that I have footage of that I will probably compile and do another video sometime to remind everybody. The level to not trust those things is such a joke. Like, it would be so beyond failing a course. It would be like if you imagine you want a page of a paper to be fully accurate, it would not be able to get through one sentence. You'd have to edit every single sentence. By the time you use something one of those creates, you would have had to do more work than generating something yourself. So you got to be careful in the modern era where these fake robotic answers come up. Trust the things you read more that were written by a human that you think was in the field, or in general, a human being in the field is just, a short way to know that that person has studied that in depth. Try and read things from humans who you think have studied something in depth. And then check, do other people agree with it? What is there other papers that build off this, or is this on its own in some weird corner? Now, but like I said, just going crazy and reading all the papers is good. That sidetrack was more about media literacy, because I want to remind people also, don't trust everything you see online, but that's always been the case. AI is not like, people have been making Photoshop, like fake digital image manipulation, for a long time. The news lies to people without AI. So that's sort of just a reminder, is a lot of people nowadays are like, be careful, because you might see something fake and it might be because of AI. No, the news has been lying to you before AI was out. There is image manipulation came out not very long after making an image at all. Like, it didn't take that long after inventing photography that people were like, "Oh, how can we change what's in the image?" So be careful about what you read. That's more of like a real world thing, because math is a lot luckier with that. You know, if somebody lies about math, you can figure it out. You can prove him wrong. You can say, nope, you're wrong, and I have the proof right here. It gets a lot sketchier when it comes to like news and politics and history and things like that. But careful what you read online. Luckily, with math, you will find not as many people are trying to lie to you about stuff, and not as many people have a motivation to put something false somewhere. So, for example, Wikipedia is a lot closer. Like, if you compare it to an accurate source, is up here. Wikipedia on math articles is a lot closer to the level of an actual source than Wikipedia on some other things. Um, but math's kind of lucky in that way. You don't have to be quite as careful because if somebody gives you a fake proof, you can disprove it. You know, the proofs speak for themselves. They're true. They're no fictionality layer needing defining. Now, and we have some more comments from the person I was using as the jumping off point from that, Arturo. I can't answer all your comments, Arturo, but thank you for leaving some cool thoughts. Hope you enjoy the math as a hobby. If you leave some more comments in a future stream, maybe I'll go further related to that. In general, those were a few thoughts that just happened to tie in. But to begin to wrap things up, I wanted to make this rant about composite numbers somewhat as an intro to give people this image in their head, primes being ingredients and composites, although they are on the whole numbers, the list of whole numbers larger than one, although the composites are the non-primes, they're also the clubs of primes, or the recipes we could make out of ingredients. And so that is a note to keep in mind as I go forward to some new videos. I also just wanted to check in because good old Halloween, well, it's All Hallows Odd, the day before All Hallows Eve. And I wanted to check in with a little pumpkin carving because I do have some really cool stuff coming. And I'm so sorry I abandoned my people. I have not wanted to stop posting over the past few months. It's a culmination of a lot of crazy stuff going on in my life. I am still okay in a lot of regards. I deal with various mental stuff, but for anyone wondering about my personal certain journeys I've been on, first of all, I can still walk fine, so my leg surgeries are still fully recovered and stuff. Second of all, I still have not drank alcohol in about 14 months, almost 14 months now. So some people may know I'm very honest, so I've admitted that back in the day I had a problem with that. Currently, I have not had a drop of alcohol in about 14 months. And so those are a few things that are good in my life, as well as going very deep in a Threeven book and some really, really important episodes that are, I don't know how long they're going to be, so I don't want to say necessarily, but I would not be surprised if one of them made it over an hour. But they're pretty long, crazy episodes. I hope everyone has seen the last few episodes I made on my other main combo class channel. Because although I descended into seeming like I was posting way less, partially it was just that I got really invested in some longer projects. And some of those were the last few episodes on my main combo class channel. So those are, in my opinion, the best videos I've made yet are the past few main episodes on my combo class channel, the past 5 or 10 of them. So, but all of my combo class are the best things I've made yet, and I'll make even better things. So when I make the Threeven book, that will be the best thing I have made yet. But then there's going to be something that happens in grade -6 that'll top that. So a lot of cool stuff will be coming. I'm so sorry, folks, that I haven't been posting it. It's partially the bits that are that I feel like are my fault or whatever, are that I really fall out of the habit of something. So when I'm not, the habit I fell very far into now is writing. And writing's a good habit. Like I spend a lot of my day studying and writing notes about it. But I fell too far into that and a little too far out of the film yourself and share the random ideas. You know, I've still been making big projects, but like the more free form bonus videos and shorts. So I'm getting my brain and my ability in some chaotic situations with the house and family here back to be able to get to the right zone, and when the right zone builds back, there'll be a crazy amount of cool videos because I've been tagging my notes about which ones this is good for the book, this one's good for a short, this one's good for a bonus video. So all the ideas are there. When I started combo class, I knew a little bit about all sorts of stuff. I still know a little bit about all sorts of stuff, but I know way more about number theory. And I already knew more than the average person, obviously. But at this point, I know a lot about number theory. Certain corners of number theory, I would be one of the only people who knows them very, very deep. And these corners relate to proving that base 6 is the greatest base and base 10 is foolish. They also relate to other things, like there's other, the number 12 is really cool too. It's not all about 6. But one thing I'll say is an incredibly important family of numbers, the 3 smooth numbers. It's all about the 3 smooth numbers. Whereas our base is all about the non-threeven 5 smooth numbers. That sounds a lot more efficient, huh? Make a base based around the non-threeven 5 smooth numbers. Sounds a lot more natural than the 3 smooth numbers, right? Well, those are the numbers that these two bases can handle the reciprocals of the fractions of. So to describe what our base can handle the reciprocals of the fractions of, you need this complicated name. It does have another name. You can call that regular to 10, which is another good term. I will get into regular to different things numbers at some point as I clarify more about smooth and rough numbers, like I mentioned. These are all different classifications of prime factors, and we can consider them like families of recipes, sort of like composites are recipes. We could consider, the square free numbers are like pastries or whatever, some family of recipes. So, in a way, the number line could be seen as this crazy, like, multi-dimensional cookbook. Different ways of combining the ingredients. And then the mysteries come, like, of course we know that, like, there will be a number that's 7 times 7 times 5 times 2. But the mysteries come when we try and pin down the size of the... Whoa, what's going on there? Some sort of animal fight. Oh man, there's some animal yelp back there. I hope it's not my cats getting into trouble. But yeah, no, my 3 cats, they get along with most of the neighborhood wildlife, but the raccoons are kind of punks. I don't like the raccoon. They haven't messed with my cats yet, but I just don't trust them. Those raccoons, they're punks. But the possums are nice. The skunks are not purposefully punks, but the skunks are also a problem. There's a skunk like half sprayed my cat Dandelion like a month or 2 ago, and it was like he's so fluffy, and he like must have caught like the edge of the skunk blast or something because it only got him a little, but oh my god, it was still so hard to get the scent out of him. But you had to pet him for like 50 years. I almost feel like he did it on purpose to get all the pets. Okay, anyway, I am going to wrap up the live stream. It is very late out here, but I have a lot of other cool things coming too. A lot are even filmed. I got over analyzing about the order that things made sense to come out. So there's certain bonus videos that are literally done, but the order didn't make sense to put them out yet. But a lot of cool stuff coming soon. I hope you all bear with me because we are coming back to grade -3, emerging from the grade -3 glitch, and we are now about halfway through grade -3. And the grade -3 glitch, I'll explain more about another time. I keep looking down at the microphone for some reason. I guess it's like intuitive for me to look at the microphone because I'm used to doing that, and it maybe gauges my distance from it. Like maybe I'm subtly making sure I'm a certain distance from it. But I should look at the camera. It's up there. Everything will be a different direction because then we can get cool shadows. At night, as I was saying, a lot of people have the shadow completely missing. They see it with their eyes while they're filming, but the filming doesn't see it because it's going the same way. But here, when you have a shadow from a different source, you can do cool things. Like now, we can see it in that camera because it's moving, And yeah, shadows are very trippy. If you want to try something trippy sometime, get a cube and try and hold it up in a way where you can make its shadow a hexagon. So hexagons are everywhere, and that's because the number 6 is everywhere. And we will continue that another day. And yes, it will also still be about 6 again. So every day will be a different topic, or every video, but a lot of them are going to be about 6 because I'm not joking. It's everywhere. I went into studying 3 even numbers, half as a joke, half real. It is now down to 1% joke, 99%, oh my God, important. Um, but anyway, that's the ranting phase of this. I hope you folks learned a few things about composite.